staying with us this morning, and everybody who is dressed in pink this morning, an extra special good morning to you. Now, dinner plate or DNA? We're about to dive into another Pinktober conversation, exploring the pressing question, is breast cancer more influenced by what we eat or our genes? Haematologist and medical oncologist at the Jamaica Cancer Society, Dr. Toni Barnes, is here to help us unpack the science behind breast cancer causation. Dr. Barnes, welcome. How are you?
How are you?
Right, happy Pinktober.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Lovely.
Same to you.
Thank you so much. A lot of people, Doc, you know, think that your genes have nothing to do with it. It's all about what you eat. Is that true or false? Or can two things be true at the same time?
I think both are really important. I think what we need to remember is that cancer, you know, is not just one disease. Cancer is a set of disorders depending on the body part that it comes from. And each one of those cancers has its own risk factors, with genetics being a major part, but lifestyle factors also coming into play as well.
So let's say, for example, if you have a propensity or a family history, heavy family history, first degree, you know, relative, your mother or your grandmother, auntie.
Because you do hear that a lot.
Yeah, a lot.
That, you know, it runs in my family.
Yeah, even if I eat healthy, and eat all the right things, no processed foods, my body's in an alkaline state, can that genetics still play a part, or is it just all about what you eat? And even if it's in your family, as long as you eat good, you won't get cancer.
So I'll give you an example about this. One of the genes that we know for sure causes breast cancer, called the BRCA or BRCA gene, that one has been found to cause breast cancer in about 60% of women who have it. So what happens to the other 40%? How do those 40% end up not developing cancer? And it's a really complicated situation, but things like your diet, your lifestyle, whether or not you smoke, how much alcohol you drink, and then other strange little things sometimes that we encounter. You know, there are studies that show people who are tall have a more high chance of getting cancer than people who are short, because tall people have more cells in their bodies. So there are a lot of little strange things.
Wow.
And things like that that can, you know, modulate the risk outside of the genetic factors.
So the genetics are there, and we can't escape that, right? Because that's what we are born with. How does our food, though, impact what, you know, our probability of getting breast cancer? Yeah,
so modulating the things that you can control, I think, is really important. So the risk factors that we have for cancer are divided into things that you can control, so modifiable things, as well as things that you can't, which are non-modifiable. So the modifiable things, definitely the diet is really important. We have a lot of processed food here, and processed food, that is a huge thing.
When you say processed food, what are we talking about?
So foods that are preserved with sometimes natural, sometimes artificial substances. So we have nitrates and nitrites. That is one preservative that we know is associated with cancer. One that some people might be surprised to hear, things like salting food.
Salting?
Salting food, so salt fish, for example.
But we have a strong salted culture. We have a strong pickling culture in Jamaica.
Definitely.
Pickled mackerel, pickled saltfish, picked salt beef, canned pork. That's a part of the culture.
And I'm really sorry to tell you, but it does increase your risk of certain types of cancers, especially the ones that are in the stomach and in the intestines. It is thought that perhaps some kind of bacteria that lives in the stomach thrives in a salty environment. Also, there are things from the salting of the food, and then when the food kind of sits in the intestines rather than moves along, so if you don't eat a lot of vegetables with them, you don't eat a lot of fiber, the food and those toxic substances sit in the stomach and don't move along, and then when they sit, it then causes irritation, inflammation, and increases your risk of cancer.
I mean, we learn, you know, the whole argument that all things in moderation. Is it that, because some people are going to say, oh, this runs in my family, that runs in my family, so I'm not going to eat none of this. I mean, do some people need to go to the extreme in order to avoid?
Well, there are recommendations that are available. So when we talk about things like red meat, we know red meat is associated with lots of different types of cancers, particularly colon. We know it is associated with breast, and the recommendation is 3 times or less per week that you have a serving of red meat. But you know, a serving is like 4 ounces, and some people, a serving of meat is an entire plate of meat.
Yes.
And so things like portion sizes and being cognizant of how much you are eating is very important. I think also that, you know, one time eating meat or one time eating salted food isn't going to be enough to cause those changes inside of your cells. It is a consistent method. So same way, if you eat vegetables one time today, it's not going to make you healthy, but it's your life, you know?
I often ask people, is it more a question of social DNA, why certain things run in a family? Because this family tends to do similar things, tends to eat similar way. And so over time, this family tends to respond to stress in a particular way, and so you have particular predispositions that are passed on socially. And so it's not really our biology, but it's, you know.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. I'll give breast cancer again as an example. When you look at the actual genes that are causing breast cancer, BRCA being one, there are maybe about 20% of the cases that are found to people who have a genetic predisposition. 20% of those cases are first-degree relatives. So there's a whole other 80% of people who don't have a family history at all, who we don't find it. So I think it's a lot more than that. Yes, definitely when you're in a family, you're eating the same things, you're exposed to the same things if you live together. But there's so much more. I think the lifestyle choices that people make probably are more important than the genetic choices, the genetic predisposition that people have.
But some people, doc, will say, well, I've never smoked, I do all the right things, I eat healthy, I exercise, and still, you know, they are diagnosed with breast cancer.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you have the perfect patient, somebody who is a vegan, they exercise every day, and they never, you know, you never find a reason why they develop cancer. I think there's so much about the illness that we don't fully understand, because you also have people who chain smoke and drink alcohol all the time and have a terrible diet, and they live to 100. So I think there are some things that we don't fully understand, and we're working on it. Research is so exciting in this field because something changes every single day. So hopefully we'll be able to figure it out soon.
You talked about the BRCA gene. Can we get it? Can we get assessed for that in Jamaica to see if you have it and what to do?
So we can take the tests off in Jamaica. We don't have the labs here that actually process the samples, but we send the samples abroad. We have a lot of people who do the testing, a lot of people who we discover, you know, from coming in and having breast cancer and then informing their children, informing their sisters, informing their mom. We find a lot of people, but unfortunately, we do have to send those samples abroad.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
Very interesting conversation. Very interesting conversation. You might not want to have cat food. So, there we go. Our guest has been Dr. Toni Barnes, Haematologist, Medical Oncologist. After the break, we're going to throw things over to TK. Well, no, actually, no. We're going to have more in Sunrise.
We're just going to have fun. Eat some of Brown Man's cake.
We'll be right back.